States. So I urge my colleagues to oppose this amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Holt. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The amendment is not agreed.
Mr. Chairman, on that I ask a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from New Jersey will be postponed. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 2, printed in Part B of House Report 113-271. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment Number 2, printed in Part B of House Report Number 113-271, offered by Mr. Flores of Texas.
Pursuant to House Resolution 419, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Flores, and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Chairman, I rise to offer a simple amendment today that makes technical and clarifying corrections to H.R. 2728. My amendment also calls on state regulators to provide their hydraulic fracturing and chemical disclosure requirement regulations to BLM for public disclosure. States have the expertise in carefully crafting hydraulic fracturing regulations that meet the unique geologic and hydrologic needs of their states. This bottoms-up regulatory relationship between the states and the federal government is one of the reasons that we are able to enjoy the vast economic benefits of the shale energy boom. These changes will ensure that the cooperative and transparent state-driven regulatory approach to energy activity will continue. The energy shale boom is driving our economic recovery, and we need to keep the federal government from slowing down energy production on taxpayer-owned federal lands with duplicative regulations and unnecessary red tape. I reserve the...
Would the gentleman yield?
Yes, I'll be happy to yield to the chair.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. We are prepared to accept this amendment. I think the gentleman's amendment goes right to the heart of what those that are opposed to this process by disclosing the chemicals which is embodied in this amendment does exactly what seems to be the opposition on the other side. I think it's a good amendment, and we're prepared to accept it.
Thank you. I thank the chairman. I'd like to yield 1 minute to Mr. Renacci of Ohio.
The gentleman from Ohio is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. I want to thank my colleague. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of the Flores amendment, which would make public states that have established efficient and effective regulatory programs that both encourage domestic development of our resources and protect the environment and health of our citizens. My home state of Ohio has some of the most transparent and robust oil and gas regulations in the nation, which in many cases far surpass federal regulations. In fact, since 1953, over 80,000 wells have been hydraulically fractured in Ohio without a single case of groundwater contamination. At this same time, we are experiencing an energy renaissance that is estimated to bring more than 65,000 jobs and contribute nearly $5 billion to Ohio's economy by 2014. Ohio now has the potential to be a leader in domestic energy production and would bring much-needed high-paying jobs and economic growth to Northeast Ohio. It is clear that prudent and responsible development of our resources that creates jobs, enhances our national security and energy independence, and impacts long-term economic growth should not be a partisan issue. I urge my friends on both sides of the aisle to support this amendment and the underlying bill, and I yield back.
Mr. Renacci for his comments. Again, this is a simple amendment in response to feedback I've received during the past few weeks. Again, the American energy shale revolution is completely dependent on hydraulic fracturing. Without this evolving technology, job creation, growth in manufacturing, lower energy prices, and lower greenhouse gas emissions would all stop. All the benefits our nation is experiencing today would stop. I urge my colleagues to vote yes on the amendment and yes on the underlying legislation, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Texas reserved. For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey rise?
Mr. Chairman, I claim time in opposition to the amendment, although I do not intend to oppose the amendment.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I will not oppose this amendment because by itself it doesn't change anything. But it does underscore the problems with the bill itself. And so I'd like to speak on that for a moment. I don't think there's anything wrong with making Interior a one-stop shopping place for state drilling regulations, although I don't know if there are any states that want to keep their regulations secret, so I don't know if that provision actually has any real impact. But let me read a provision of the bill that this amendment strikes so that everyone understands what the amendment is trying to do. Subsection B of the bill says Interior shall defer to all state regulations for all activities related to any component of the hydraulic fracturing process. And it then goes on to say, quote, regardless of whether those rules are duplicative, more or less restrictive, shall have different requirements, or do not meet federal guidelines. Now, apparently the majority and as well as the author of this amendment recognized that the last sentence was a little excessive, and now this amendment proposes to strike that. But it doesn't make any difference because in subsection A, the bill reads that Interior cannot enforce any of its regulations or guidance for any component of the hydraulic fracturing process. Subsection A strips Interior of their authority to enforce. This certainly has the same effect as the language in subsection B directing them to defer with respect to any regulations or requirements. So even after this amendment is adopted, and we're prepared to accept it, the language in the bill will still require that Interior defer to the states, regardless of whether state rules are less restrictive, are adequate, or are inadequate, or if they don't meet federal guidelines. That's the problem with the bill. The bill remains the same. This amendment is really superfluous. I will not oppose the amendment, but it does underscore the fundamental problem with the legislation that we're considering here today. It strips the Interior of any authority to protect public health, public safety from drilling and fracking operations on public lands. So although I will also accept the amendment, I will continue to oppose the underlying bill. And with that, I will yield back unless the gentleman wants to discuss this further.
I thank the gentleman for accepting the amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from New Jersey yields back. Gentleman from Texas yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Texas. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 3, printed in Part B of House Report 113-271. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment made in order under the rule.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 3, printed in Part B of House Report number 113-271, offered by Mr. Reed of New York.
Pursuant to House Resolution 419, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Reed, and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent that Amendment Number 3, printed in Part B of House Report 113-271, be modified by the form I have placed at the desk.
The clerk will report the modification.
Amendment 2, Amendment Number 3, offered by Mr. Reed of New York. Strike page 4 after line 10 and insert page 2 after line 19.
Without objection, the amendment is modified. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I have a straightforward amendment to H.R. 2728, which I am offering on a bipartisan basis with my colleague from California, Mr. Costa. Our amendment will direct the Government Accountability Office to conduct a study on the number of jobs created from shale development in America. In addition, the study will look at the impact that shale production has had on energy prices and state and federal revenues. Mr. Chairman, this is a straightforward, simple amendment to quantify and document the economic benefits from shale development in America. As I serve on the Natural Gas Caucus as well as the Manufacturing Caucus, I can tell you that the development of natural gas in America has put us on a course to have a manufacturing rebirth and renaissance here in the United States. It is straight consistent with my philosophy that we need to build it here and sell it there. And this amendment will quantify on the federal level the economic benefits that are associated with the development of this resource, not only from the direct jobs of producing the resource, but the indirect and secondary jobs in the United States manufacturing sector, as well as all the other jobs that would support the development of this resource that we have been blessed with here in America. I would yield to the chairman of the Natural Resource Committee.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. I think this amendment will probably and no doubt prove what we have been saying, that producing American energy will produce American jobs. I think the gentleman's amendment adds to this legislation, and I'm willing to accept that, and I'll yield back to the gentleman.
I thank the gentleman for that acceptance of the amendment. And at this point in time, Mr. Chairman, I'd be pleased to yield 2 minutes to my co-sponsor on this amendment, Mr. Costa from California.
Gentleman from California is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank my friend, the gentleman from New York, and fellow co-chair of the Natural Gas Caucus, Mr. Reid, for the time. Places like the San Joaquin Valley, which I represent, are still struggling to create jobs in the wake of our Great Recession. Energy production is a game changer, not only in California but around the country. These are exciting times with the finds in the Marcellus Shale, the Barnett, the Balkan, and the Monterey Shale in California, which is estimated to be as large, if not larger, than the others that I've mentioned. Those who doubt the ability of states to regulate oil and gas industry, I urge you to look at my home state in California, which has put forth a long-term plan for responsible production of natural gas that the governor signed into law last month. Many other states are taking their lead because we know one size doesn't fit all, and therefore I think that is a preferred approach. As all of us in the House are looking to determine what our next generation economy will look like, efforts like the amendment that we are proposing here, I believe, are critically important. The United States is on track to become the largest oil and gas producer in the world in the next few years. These are exciting times. The potential of the United States, Canada, and Mexico will far surpass the Middle East in the production of fossil fuels. We should take advantage, therefore, of this opportunity, this dividend that will benefit our economy and also benefit the geopolitics of the world that we live in that is so dangerous. From the shift of being importers of our energy to an international exporter will yield significant dividends for both our economy and global security. Our amendment will show that the economic opportunity cost of blocking or continuing to delay responsible development of natural gas simply should not be the case. The fact is that this study is more about the numbers and the dollars and how we do it safely and telling this side of the story, the human side of the story. I support the amendment and yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from New York.
Reclaim my time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, at this point in time, I would just like to note in this chamber you have a gentleman from California, a gentleman from New York, standing together to highlight the game-changing economic impact of the development of this natural resource. And I believe this amendment will clearly articulate how this goes to create a manufacturing rebirth, a job renaissance here in America. And I join with him in this amendment, and I urge all my colleagues to support the Reid-Costa amendment. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman from New York yields back. Does any member claim time in opposition? If not, the question is on the amendment as modified offered by the gentleman from New York. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment as modified is agreed to. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 4, printed in Part B of House Report 113-271. For what purpose does the gentleman from Oregon seek recognition?
I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment numbered 4, printed in Part B of House Report number 113-271, offered by Mr. DeFazio of Oregon.
Pursuant to House Resolution 419, the gentleman from Oregon, Mr. DeFazio, and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Oregon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an amendment that I think will help deliver on some of the promises of being made here today. This would say that natural gas produced on federal lands only, would not be allowed to be exported from the United States. Now, the principal argument we're hearing on the Republican side is that by adopting their standard, which they say is a states' rights standard, and I've already raised concerns about that on fracking, that it will encourage yet more development on both federal lands, increase our domestic energy supply, and free us from the OPEC cartel. Okay, but that won't work if we produce energy on federal lands and then we export it to other countries like China or Japan or elsewhere. The Energy Information Administration has done a study. They say there will be a tipping point in the export of liquefied natural gas where we will create a world market. We will be subject to the world price. That means that there would be a dramatic increase in gas prices here in the United States, both for residential, factory use, and as a input for manufacturing fertilizer or other sorts of manufacturing. So suddenly we would see an advantage which we have only very, very recently developed. We have manufacturing companies bringing production back to the U.S. because of our plentiful natural gas and saying it's to our advantage. Our energy's cheaper here, our feedstocks are cheaper here. This is a tremendous advantage for us, and they're producing here and exporting finished goods. If we begin to export in great volume the raw material, the feedstock, the natural gas, through a liquefied process, then suddenly we're in the international market. It means a dramatic run-up in natural gas prices. We lose our competitive advantage for domestic manufacturing, and we're back where we are with oil, despite the idea that if we produce more oil, we will somehow become free of OPEC or other firms, other countries around the world. The fact is that oil is traded as an international commodity, and no matter how much we produce here, it's going to be priced internationally at the highest price being paid in the international market. That is not so today for natural gas. But if we export enough of it and create enough capacity to export it, that will become the case. So this would have no impact on gas produced on state lands, Indian lands, private lands. It just simply says that approximately 15% of the natural gas being produced on federal lands could not be exported, must be used domestically to keep prices down here at home, to advantage manufacturers here at home. With that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Oregon reserves. What purpose does the gentleman from Washington rise?
Mr. Chairman, I rise to claim time in opposition to the amendment.
Gentleman's recognized.
I yield myself 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A similar amendment like this has been offered multiple times in our committee markups, and they have always failed on the bipartisan vote. And they have also, similar amendments like this has also failed on the floor. This is nothing more than an effort to make production on federal lands more challenging and less valuable. The vast majority of the natural gas that's produced in the United States stays in North America. But that is exported, 98% goes to Canada and Mexico. We ought to keep those customers. Additionally, since 2009, the U.S. has been the largest producer of natural gas in the world, which I guess goes to my friend from Oregon's argument. But energy is going to be globally decided in the marketplace. Many companies operating in the United States are international companies with businesses all over the world. Undercutting the basic premise of the free market in restricting the use of the resource always has real economic consequences in the future. Now, there's one other point about this amendment, too. The amendment makes it unclear what is considered natural gas. The question arises, are products derived from natural gas also only to be sold in the United States because they are made from natural gas? It's unclear the way the amendment is drafted, but if that were to be the case, Mr. Chairman, there would be a vast spin-off industries that would be affected, namely the plastic industries. So I tend to be one that believes that the American consumer, in fact consumers everywhere, are benefited if we have free trade in the world. That should apply to everything, including a big resource that we are becoming a leader in, and this amendment, I think, is contrary to that approach. And so with that, I will reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Washington reserves. Gentleman from Oregon is recognized.
To the gentleman's point, it's absolutely clear. It says gas. It does not say products derived from gas, fertilizer, or manufactured plastics or anything else. It just says the gas must be sold here in the United States. He admits and says that it'll make it less valuable. That means he's looking at increasing the price of natural gas here to accommodate exports overseas to put us in a world market. Then we're yet again screwed, just like we've been with oil for years. We're back to the point where we're competing in an international market. We see, we lose international competitiveness. We lose more manufacturing. You know, this is pretty transparent here. I mean, the industry's pressuring, I'm sure, on their side of the aisle, saying, oh my God, don't do that. Don't say that 15% of the gas produced on federal lands belonging to the taxpayers of the United States has to be used here to help keep down our prices for our homes, for our manufacturing, to give us a competitive world advantage. Let's do it like all our other free trade, which is bankrupting the country and exported, millions of manufacturing jobs over the last few years. Talked about it again, globally decided free market. Use those words. Let's have, if we go to a globally decided free market in the export of natural gas, we lose the advantage, and their basic premise that this will lower prices for Americans is stood on its head. If you don't adopt this amendment, if you vote against it, you're voting to increase the price of natural gas according to the Energy Information Administration for all consumers and manufacturers and the downstream products from those in the United States of America. So if you really want to lower the price to consumers, vote for this amendment. With that, I yield back all my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Washington is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I am very pleased to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Turner.
Gentleman from Ohio is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chair, the DeFazio amendment is ill-conceived. Creating jobs in the energy sector is creating American jobs, and this amendment would, in fact, inhibit our ability to reduce our trade deficit and also affects the issue of providing natural gas to our strategic allies. As a result of increased natural gas production, the price of natural gas has fallen over the last few years, making it competitive in the global marketplace. This presents an opportunity to export U.S. natural gas. Many of our allies rely heavily upon a single source or unstable regions for natural gas. For example, Russia has used its European market dominance to influence other countries, cutting off natural gas supplies over various disputes. Poland is so eager to wean itself off Russia for natural gas that it plans to buy LNG from Qatar at a price estimated to be 40 to 50% higher than the rate charged by Gazprom, Russia's state-owned monopoly, just to be able to have some independence. Increasing natural gas exports would provide our allies with an alternative and reliable source of energy, helping to strengthen our economic and geopolitical partnerships. It should be noted that the boom in natural gas production has already made an impact. Supplies previously destined for our shores but no longer needed as a result of increased productions have been diverted elsewhere. This increase in global supply has helped several European countries successfully renegotiate their long-term contracts with Gazprom, Russia's state-owned monopoly. Mr. Chair and General, when it comes to trade, we often talk about barriers that other countries have to U.S. producers, ones that we must overcome in order to export. In this case, these are regulatory burdens we're placing upon ourselves that are preventing our ability to create jobs and preventing our ability to lower our overall trade deficit. Restraining U.S. natural gas exports would only hurt our ability to bolster strategic partnerships and create jobs right here at home. The DeFazio Amendment does nothing to decrease the cost currently of natural gas. This is an important ability to create jobs and lower our trade deficit. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Washington.
How much time do I have remaining, Mr. Chairman?
1 minute.
I yield myself the balance of time. I just simply want to say, and correct my good friend from Oregon, I did not say that because natural gas would enter the international market it would become less valuable. I simply said that it will become part of the global market. I dare say that when oil was discovered in Titusville, Pennsylvania, nobody thought that that oil would become part of a world market, but it has. But unfortunately, because we in the United States have not utilized our resources like we should, with crude oil and not compete as we should with past decisions, there was a cartel that was formed internationally called OPEC. They control the oil market. The best way to beat cartels is to outsupply them. If we are going to be a leader in natural gas in the world, we ought to take advantage of that and lead when we can, but recognize that free markets give the best services to people, recipients of that, not only in the United States, but in America. With that, I urge rejection of the DeFazio Amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Oregon. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. Any of the chairs, the noes have it. Gentleman from Oregon is recognized.
Recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Oregon will be postponed. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 5, printed in Part B of House Report 113-271. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Texas seek recognition?
I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment numbered 5, printed in Part B of House Report number 113-271, offered by Ms. Jackson Lee of Texas.
Pursuant to House Resolution 419, the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Jackson Lee, and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Texas.
I will, in just a second, yield to the distinguished chairman. But just in a sentence, the Jackson Lee Amendment is as simple and will provide an annual review of any and all hydraulic fracturing activity and submit a report to Congress. Now I would like to yield to the chairman, Chairman Hastings, for the purposes of entertaining a question.
I thank the gentlelady for her amendment, and I thank the gentlelady for yielding to me for the purpose of entering into a colloquy. Mr. Chairman, and I ask my friend from Texas, the text of the gentlelady's amendment requires the Secretary of Interior to conduct an annual review on all state hydraulic fracturing activity. My concern is that this provision appears to be very broad. I would be delighted to work with the gentlelady as this bill works its way through the legislative process to consider some additional conditions to ensure that the broad review is targeted at those areas subject to the jurisdiction of the committee and the results in the report to Congress that is meaningful and productive. To that end, would the gentlelady be willing to work with me to clarify that her amendment is intended to apply to state permitting of hydraulic fracturing on federal lands? And I'll yield back to the gentlelady.
I thank the chairman for yielding, and then thank him for working with me on this matter. And I appreciate your willingness to work with me, and I want to achieve what the ultimate intent was, and that is to have this amendment pertain to federal lands. My response is that I do not object to a modification of the amendment to make clear that the review and report required of the Secretary should be limited to state permitting of hydraulic fracturing on federal lands, which will in fact provide this Congress with the necessary information on these processes. And I yield to the chairman.
Well, if that is the clarification, the gentlelady would work with me that this is subject to federal lands. With that clarification, and the review and report required by the Secretary should be limited to state permitting of hydraulic fracturing of lands, I am willing to accept the gentlelady's amendment, and I thank her for her work on that, and I'll yield back to the gentlelady.
I thank the chairman, and if I might, Mr. Chairman, may I ask how much time is left?
2.5 minutes.
Thank you. Just going to briefly talk about the issues and thank the gentleman for yielding. I just wanted to indicate that we have the opportunity to do a number of things, create jobs, energy independence, preserve and create a strong economy, and protect our environment. I am interested in seeing the opportunity for low-income families to be able to be helped in the cold of the winter and the heat of the summer, to be able to find relief from energy costs that we've talked about so often. And I would hope that as we move forward with the legislation that we will be able to work together. I believe that the 2.1 million jobs that are created and that the increase of the consumers' household dollars and the amounts of money going into the government treasury really should bring us together. And my amendment is clarified by the chairman in my discussion in the colloquy, is to give Congress that oversight pertaining to those federal lands. And I thank the chairman for his clarification and looking forward to working with him and maintaining the language in the bill, however, with the understanding that we will get that review for federal lands and that will come from the Secretary of Interior to the United States Congress. With that, Mr. Chairman, I am yielding back, and I believe we have an accepted amendment.
Yields back is on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Texas. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, proceedings will now resume on those amendments printed in Part B of House Report 113-271 on which further proceedings were postponed in the following order. Amendment number 1 by Mr. Holt of New Jersey. Amendment number 4 by Mr. DeFazio of Oregon. The chair will reduce to 2 minutes the minimum time for any electronic vote after the first vote in this series. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on Amendment number 1, printed in Part B of House Report 113-271 by the gentleman from New Jersey. Mr. Holt, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment numbered 1, printed in Part B of House Report number 113-271, offered by Mr. Holt of New Jersey.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in favor, in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having arisen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 15-minute vote.
Earlier today, the House passed a bill that would boost oil and gas production on federal lands. They've been debating another energy bill, a bill that would set deadlines for, a bill that would prohibit the Interior Department from enforcing federal rules related to hydraulic fracturing in those states that have their own fracking regulations. Votes here on 2 amendments. This one is by Rush Holt, Democrat of New Jersey, an amendment which would allow the Interior Department to regulate methane from oil and gas operations on public lands. 15-minute vote here, followed by a 5-minute vote on the next amendment. In earlier debate on that other energy bill expanding oil production on federal lands, the Democratic whip Steny Hoyer came to the floor and attacked Republicans for what he called a lack of significant legislation as the legislative year begins to wind down. We're going to show you the comments of Steny Hoyer from earlier today during this vote.
4 people in the gallery. I see 3 members on the floor. The galleries are empty. The floor is empty because we're not doing anything. And it's not because we don't have a lot of things to do. We have 7 if you count tomorrow, where we will leave by 12 o'clock, 6 full days left in the session in 2013. And yet we fiddle here while the country sees itself burning. On bills that are going nowhere, that have no priority, and deal with a subject, energy, which happily is one of the most successful places we are at in America today, where we're fast becoming the energy independent, low-cost energy situs of the world. And we have no budget conference coming to this floor scheduled in the 6 full days that we have left, and the 2 other days that may be counted in which we come in at 6:30 and meet for probably a half an hour or 45 minutes and vote on suspension bills. And yet we have spent this entire week, and we left, of course, a hard-working day yesterday. We left doing work at 2:30 in the afternoon. No budget conference, no fiscal policy, no solution to the crisis that confronted us when we shut down government. I urge that we have a budget conference report by November 22nd, that's tomorrow, so that we didn't, as our practice has been in recent months and years, to confront real issues only when crisis gives us no other alternative. No immigration reform has been brought to the floor, although it passed the Senate with 68 votes. Comprehensive immigration reform, which will address a problem that every member on this House says is an immigration system that is broken. The majority leader said that the other day, and I asked him about the 4 bills that our Republican friends, Mr. Speaker, have reported out of committee. But they languish somewhere in the netherworld, not brought to the floor for consideration by this House. And yet we have time to consider bills that will have no impact, which the President says he'll veto, and are not bipartisan bills, were reported out of committee in a partisan fashion, as so much of the legislation that we consider on this House floor is. Partisan, confrontational, no consensus pieces of legislation. Yet a comprehensive immigration reform bill that had 68 votes, over 2/3 of the United States Senate, 14 Republicans voted for that bill, yet the Speaker says he's not for it and won't bring it to the floor. That's the same Speaker that says, let the House work its will. The House cannot work its will if the legislation is not brought to the floor by the House, which can only be done by the Republican majority, Mr. Speaker, as you know. And so they keep that bill from being considered. Although CBO says it will help the economy, grow jobs, and fix a broken system. 6 full days left to go on the schedule in 2013. Yet the Farm Bill, reported out of the committee 2 years ago on a bipartisan fashion in the last Congress, but never brought to this floor, while we twiddled our thumbs while Rome burned. The Farm Bill lies languishing in conference committee because a bipartisan bill passed by the United States Senate was not considered in this House, but a partisan bill with almost no Democratic votes. And the second piece of that Farm Bill, the nutritional part, with not a single Democratic vote. I have
2 minutes.
2 minutes.
Gentleman's recognized for additional 3 minutes.
3 minutes.
Lies languishing in the conference committee because it was passed in an extraordinarily partisan fashion, where Mr. Lucas's bill reported out in a bipartisan fashion. The American public, Mr. Speaker, say, let's act bipartisanly. We did. With Democratic and Republican votes, the Farm Bill came out of the Agricultural Committee and turned into a partisan bill on this floor by my Republican colleagues. And so it languishes with 6 days left, with the Farm Bill expiring on December 31st. No action. No progress. We need to pay our doctors a proper compensation for the services they give. I'm sure the gentleman from the Rules Committee, who is himself a medical doctor, understands this necessity. And we need to fix the sustainable growth, but it languishes somewhere out in the netherworld while we have 6 days left, unfixed, unscheduled. I've asked the Majority Leader numerous times, is that going to be brought to the floor? It's not to the floor. Discrimination in the workplace, passed by the Senate in a bipartisan fashion, ENDA. Not going to be brought to this floor. Speaker says he's opposed to it. So the House will not be able to work its will again on a piece of legislation that, in my opinion, would have a majority of the votes on this floor. No doubt in my mind. And on the whip, I count votes, Mr. Speaker, as you know. And it would have the majority of votes on this floor. But the Speaker and the Majority Leader will not bring it to this floor. Unemployment insurance for 1.2 million people ends on December 31st, and we have 6 days left to go of full work. And 2 partial days when we come in at 6:30. And yet unemployment insurance has not been brought to this floor to be extended for those 1.1 million people with still 7.2 or 7.3% unemployment. And unemployment insurance, a critically important issue, is somewhere out there but not on this floor, while we consider legislation this entire week that the majority knows will not pass the United States Senate and will not be signed by the President of the United States, even if it was. But they make a message, perhaps, to their base. Politics. While the budget conference, immigration reform, the farm bill, the sustainable growth rate, doc reimbursement for Medicare patients, discrimination in the workplace, and unemployment insurance. And yes, I would add to that tax extenders. None of it on this floor. One additional
I yield the gentleman additional 2 minutes.
The gentleman is recognized for an additional 2 minutes.
No one ought to ask themselves why the American people holds this institution in such low regard. None of us who have served in this institution for any period of time are proud of what we're doing in this Congress. And we lament the unwillingness of the leadership of this House to have us do work that the American public knows we must be doing. And so, Mr. Speaker, I rise. I rise today in support of the previous question. This is not just an ordinary previous question. What this previous question says, we will not adjourn, American people. We will not adjourn on December 13th, as is projected by the majority to be the date on which we adjourn. We will not adjourn until such time as we have done the important work that the American people expect of us, the responsible work that the American people expect of us, the work that we ought to expect of ourselves. And so we consider this bill. But I would hope that we would defeat the previous question. And if we defeat the previous question, then we will bring to this floor a resolution which will say we shall not adjourn until we have done a budget conference that precludes fiscal crisis, shutting down government, a refusal to pay America's debts, that we pass an immigration reform bill that fixes what everybody knows is a broken system, until we bring a farm bill to the floor which will preclude farmers and consumers and those who need nutritional help being put at risk. One additional minute.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman is recognized for an additional 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have in my hand a letter. This is not a letter from Democrats. This is a letter from 13 Republicans, leaders, chairs of subcommittees of the appropriation committees that say to the Budget Conference Committee, bring a solution to the floor before the Thanksgiving break and no later than December 2nd. And yet, ladies and gentlemen of this House, Mr. Speaker, and yes, Mr. Speaker, all of us speak to the American people who ought to be asking us why. Why? Why do we waste time when so much important work remains to be done? Defeat the previous question. Allow us to offer a resolution which will say to the American people, we will continue to work until we get your work done. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. A gentleman from Texas.
Reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Texas reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I want to associate myself with the remarks of our distinguished whip. It is frustrating to serve in the People's House and to watch as this leadership purposely tries to avoid doing the people's business. It is frustrating when you go home and you talk to farmers and they want to know where the farm bill is. It is frustrating when you talk to people about immigration and they look at what happened in the United States Senate where it passed overwhelmingly with bipartisan support, and we can't even get anything scheduled here. We can't even get anything scheduled here. It is frustrating when people, you know, are still reeling over the fact that the Republicans shut the government down, and they want to make sure we don't ever repeat it, and yet we have no budget resolution, no budget conference that has been put together to make sure that we are on a roadmap, but we don't have any more of these Ted Cruz-led shutdowns around here. So it is very frustrating. And I think the gentleman from Maryland, you know, said it very clearly that the American people are frustrated. It's not just Democrats. It is Democrats and Republicans that are frustrated. And
parliamentary inquiry, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman will state his. Does the gentleman yield? Gentleman from Massachusetts yield.
Yes.
Is it in order to...
Gentleman will state his inquiry.
Is it in order to refer to members of the other body by name?
Yes. We're allowed to do that now.
The chair will not provide advisory opinions.
Yeah. So we don't want another Ted Cruz-led shutdown here in the House of Representatives. I think the American people are fed up with that. And then, you know, as a distinguished minority whip pointed out, I mean, we're not even in session more than 6 days from now until the end of the year, which is absolutely unconscionable. And you said to yourself, well, maybe the Republicans are planning to do something, you know, in the future. Maybe they have an agenda for the future. And then we read in Politico that last Thursday a group of House Republicans filed into Majority Leader Eric Cantor's Capitol office suite and received a blank piece of paper labeled Agenda 2014, just like this, Mr. Speaker. This is their agenda for 2014. And a Republican aide put it more bluntly by saying, what we have done so far this year clearly hasn't worked. This is their agenda for next year. It might as well be the agenda for the rest of this year. It's nothing. Nothing that is improving the quality of life for the people that we represent. And again, it fuels a cynicism all across the country that the majority party here doesn't seem to care about what happens to regular people. And that is very, very disconcerting. I guess they could go back and say that, you know, their big accomplishment was that they complained about the Affordable Care Act. Over 40-something times they brought bills to the floor to try to repeal it, never once offering an alternative to improve it, never once giving an alternative idea that would help address the fact that tens of millions of our citizens don't have health insurance, and millions do have health insurance, but it's really not health insurance because when they get sick, they realize they've been paying for a policy that provides them nothing. But there's no alternative. There's no alternative agenda to try to address those issues. It's just they're against it. I guess it's easy to say no, but the bottom line is I think the American people are looking for us to say yes to some things. So, Mr. Speaker, if we defeat the previous question, I will offer an amendment to the rule to bring up House Resolution 424, Ranking Member Slaughter's resolution prohibiting an adjournment of the House until we adopt a budget conference report. What that means is that we should not adjourn until we do our job. That shouldn't be a radical idea. I'd like to think there's bipartisan consensus that we ought to do our job, and that's what this would require. So, Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to insert the text of the amendment in the record along with extraneous materials, material immediately prior to the vote on the previous question.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, I urge my colleagues to vote no and defeat the previous question. I urge a no vote on the rule and on the underlying bills, which, to be honest with you, are a waste of our time. They are going nowhere in the Senate, and the President has already issued a veto threat on them. And with that, Mr. Speaker, with one last urging of my Republican colleagues to stay here and do your work, with that, I will yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
I thank the Speaker. I'll yield myself the balance of our time.
The gentleman is recognized.
You know, Mr. Speaker, it was a little over a year ago the American people went to the polls, and in their wisdom, they elected divided government. They knew what divided government looked like. They had seen it for the 2 years prior. The President came to town in 2009 and promised a lot of sweeping changes, and he delivered on those sweeping changes during the first 2 years of his administration. Had a health care bill passed. Health care bill passed without a single Republican vote. You talk about a partisan vote. The Patient Protection Affordable Care Act was a partisan vote, and unfortunately, we're seeing now, as we have convulsed the country with these changes that are occurring within the insurance system, we see the changes that are going to occur to our providers, our doctors, our hospitals, our nurses in the months ahead. This is a serious situation, and it required serious action be taken. I won't apologize for any action that's been taken by the majority in this House to try to rein in the excesses of the administration and a previous Democratic-controlled Congress when they took over 1/6 of the nation's economy in a partisan fashion without a single Republican vote. The sequester was passed in August of 2011, was passed at the request of the President. The gentleman's talked about shutdowns and defaults in the government. Do you remember that the sequester was the compromise proposed by the President and the Office of Management of the Budget at the White House in order to prevent defaulting on our debt? A very difficult vote for many of us in this House. But what has the sequester delivered? The sequester delivered what no one had been able to deliver in the 4 years previously, and that is a federal budget deficit that's below $1 trillion. Doesn't sound like a big ask that the American people had. We want you to stop spending so much money. The sequester delivered on that promise, and I find it strange now that the gentleman from Massachusetts will impugn the integrity of people who voted in favor of that sequester when the President and the minority leader of the House of Representatives now want to take credit for the fact that the deficit was cut in half over the last 4 years. The only reason it was cut in half was because they raised it to unsustainable levels, and now the sequester has reined that back in. And it's quite likely that the deficit at the end of fiscal year 2014 will in fact be lower if we don't do something to damage the trajectory that we are on. The immigration bill passed by the Senate, I don't think it's here at the House. I think it's got an origination problem and is unconstitutional. If there's a bill at the desk, I'll be happy to look at it, but I don't think that has occurred. And the gentleman knows that. This bill that we're considering today would lower the price of natural gas delivered to consumers in the state of Massachusetts. I have a table prepared by the Committee on Energy and Commerce. The average price for natural gas, the national average, is $9.19 per 1,000 cubic feet. In Massachusetts, it's $13.18. So this is a bill today that could deliver product to the gentleman's constituents in Massachusetts at a much more reasonable price. This sounds to me like a bill that will help the economy. This sounds to me like a bill that may provide jobs for the American people. I would like to ask unanimous consent that the table prepared by the Committee on Energy and Commerce be put into the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
The Minority Whip talked about the dock fix. Our committee, Committee on Energy and Commerce, did pass in a bipartisan fashion a repeal of the Sustainable Growth Rate formula. I think it's a good bill. I think it was a bill where we had participation from both sides of the dais, not a single dissenting vote, when we voted on the bill in committee right before the August recess. There is another body here in the Capitol building. They are considering their own version of a similar bill in the appropriate Finance Committee over in the other body. I don't want to prejudge or preclude what they will or won't do. I am anxious for them to do something that would give us a negotiating point where we could consider moving forward with a final repeal of this problem. But in fact, the legislative branch consists of two bodies, this body and the other body on the other side. Until the Finance Committee acts, there's little more that the Energy and Commerce can do to push that bill forward. Well, Mr. Speaker, today's rule provides for consideration of a critical bill to ensure our energy infrastructure needs are being met. Mr. Pompeo has done a good job. I applaud him and our committee for the thoughtful legislation. I urge my colleagues to support both the rule and the underlying bill. I'm now prepared to yield back the balance of my time and move the previous question on the resolution.
Comments from earlier floor debate on a bill that would increase oil and gas drilling on federal land. That bill passed. It is opposed by the administration, not likely to be taken up in the U.S. Senate. The House then moved on to a bill that gives states fracking regulations priority over federal rules, and this is an amendment vote. Rush Holt of New Jersey, a Democrat, with an amendment that would allow the Interior Department to regulate methane from oil and gas operations on public lands. This has been a 15-minute vote. One more amendment vote will follow this, a 2-minute vote, and then we expect a Democratic motion to recommit and final passage after that. Earlier today, Florida Republican Congressman Trey Radel pleaded guilty in Washington to a misdemeanor charge of cocaine possession. He was sentenced to a year's probation as part of a plea agreement. AP says that Congressman Radel acknowledged he agreed to buy the cocaine for $250 in a Washington, D.C. neighborhood on October the 9th. Also, late news this afternoon from several organizations, including the Washington Post, reporting that Congresswoman Grace Meng of New York was attacked and robbed Tuesday in Eastern Market in the nation's capital. The Post says that her office said in a statement she suffered a bruise on her chin and underwent a CAT scan at George Washington University Hospital. Quote, "While this was a frightening ordeal, I fortunately was not seriously injured," Meng said in a statement. Quote, "Obviously things could have been much worse. I thank the U.S. Capitol Police and the District of Columbia Police for responding quickly and professionally." That's from Grace Meng of New York, who was robbed last night in the nation's capital. Tomorrow in the Capitol, they will welcome a new congressman. Representative Vance McAllister, Representative-elect McAllister, will replace former Louisiana Congressman Rodney Alexander, who retired earlier this year, and that swearing-in ceremony will be held tomorrow.
On this vote, the yeas are 190, the nays are 230. The amendment is not adopted. The committee will come to order. The committee will come to order. Will all members please take their seats? The committee will come to order. Members, please take your conversations off the floor. The committee will come to order. Members will please take their seats. Okay. Keep going, order. The committee will come to order. Good. The committee will come to order. The chair would ask all present to rise for the purpose of a moment of silence. The chair asks that the committee now observe a moment of silence in remembrance of our brave men and women in uniform who have given their lives in the service of our nation in Iraq and Afghanistan and their families, and of all who serve in our armed forces and their families.